ABC's Channel 7. Yeah, JR, and I just looked at his story. I was like, oh my God, that's wild.
The quotes from the woman.
Yeah, she is a Lord. Yeah. You know, how they found out someone moved out of them?
I didn't.
I don't know how they found her, man. She's... It's not what I was expecting, because I was like, oh, I haven't got a chance to watch JR's thing from this. It's been one over a piece.
Yeah. Sort of. Because they signed it, and I was like, well, I'll just drive there and we'll look at whatever we have in the park.
And then you saw it, yeah. That's exactly what I did. I went back here and then just, you know, looked at it.
I wonder how they make it to Vallejo. I love any of these cuts.
And it's just complicates it, so I don't think we're going to.
But asking the producer for a map is part of it.
We didn't get much support over there.
You take security with you together?
To go to a lot of places we do, and we get our vans broken into, and we're targeted.
Oh, I know, I've seen them.
It's
I've seen
bad.
the news stuff.
Yeah.
You guys may have recovered some of it.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, obviously they're valuable, but I didn't realize that was a thing until years ago, right?
Yeah.
They started rotting and shooting people for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, San Jose.
We just have a lot of incidents where the windows are broken and people are
Just
grabbing the smash and grab thing, in addition to, you know, confrontations, but
yeah.
a lot of smash and grab. So we have, it started off as one area, and now it's like 25 areas, that if we go to that place, we have to have a security person with us.
That's for sure. I'm wondering if we have security in Lafayette.
Really? In Lafayette?
Because it's probably 4 a.m. and your time to be out type thing.
Yeah, I don't blame them. I've been harassed along the street both times. Yeah. Like it have to be.
Well, you're out at that time. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
never really.
Are all these comments we're making going to be on the news?
It'd be a good story, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be a great story? They're rolling right now. You guys didn't know.
It doesn't work that way. How come you guys didn't picture us? We have a copy of the digital copy.
We're going to get a hard copy.
Okay.
Yeah, just Attorney Abrams has the latest photo, I think.
Yeah.
So you have a handout or something when this is over? Okay. I like that, actually. A lot of places don't do that anymore. Stare at my phone too much.
I was trying to think before I
It's
leave.
nice to have a piece of paper sometimes, and I can write a note on the side. And, yeah, because otherwise, yeah, it's just different. It's a rarity. Really? I slacked it to you. It's like, I don't want to be in the field looking at Slack and emails and texts on 2 different phones. And I have it for the day. Absolutely. Long time now for me. I came here a lot with Randy, Gabe. I come here and I'm hanging out and I'm thinking of Randy today. She's giving a ping.
I even worked in Sacramento like that. I don't think I've ever been in.
Really?
Yeah, but it was. Yeah, it is. I feel like I was across the street.
Well, that's the courthouse. So.
Oh,
and there's
the DA's
another.
office
Yeah, there was.
across?
No, it's always been in this building. I forget what the other office was.
Oh.
Is it the sheriff?
Yeah, and I did that Travis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick, I was
I've done one press conference in here was for and how long ago. Yeah, it gets all blurred together.
I don't remember the beginning of it either.
I believe so. Well, they're in here, so maybe someone can help me out.
Oh, I'm sure something is.
Yeah. That's the only one for
Something's always happening somewhere. Which I don't remember. Oh, okay. At least you left it back. That's the funny part. It's a big deal. I don't know. I don't know if we messed stuff up or not.
You don't touch anything.
We already, I know. Does that mess you guys up?
Yeah.
Where is it? You want it off? We can turn it back off.
Actually, that's a much better improvement.
I like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I guess the consensus is leave it on.
Yeah, let's keep it along. We need somebody, a boss.
Deeper the whites.
I like
Morning. Good morning.
I need to put my notes up here.
want to sign.
It's okay. You guys here? Leiden. So first of all, I'm District Attorney Christian Abrams, and this is, come on over here. This is my interim chief of investigations, Matt Leiden, and I have two of the cold case investigators here, Steve Housey and Kevin Quaylo. So today we're holding this press conference because we got so many inquiries from the public and from the press regarding the abduction and the murder of Jeremy Stoner. So I thought instead of doing 20 different interviews yesterday, it was better to just have you all in one room and we could give out the same information to all of you. Good morning. As you can see, I don't want you to block, but as you can see, we're here about Jeremy Stoner. And first, I just want to say how grateful I am that we have a cold case unit in our office. When I first got elected in 2014, it was a priority of mine to reinstate the cold case unit here at the DA's office that had been in effect under District Attorney David Paulson, so I really credit him with having a cold case unit in our office. At that time, when he was the district attorney, I was assigned to the homicide team, and I had worked with our cold case investigators on several cases and tried several of those cold cases that they solved. So I understand the very important nature of having a cold case in your office if you can have one. So in 2014, when I was elected, I reinstated that cold case unit, and it's ironic, but one of the first investigators that I had in that cold case unit was Kevin Quaylo, after he had retired from being a police officer at the Vallejo Police Department. And so, and he has circled back, and he's now one of our cold case investigators now. So, you know, I'm going to say a lot of things that I think you guys already know, and obviously we're going to answer questions that we can answer, but there's a lot of questions that we can't answer because we will now have a pending criminal case against another suspect. So, but what we know, you know, and just going back into looking at this case, we all know that on February 21st, 1987, that Jeremy Stoner went missing from his home in Vallejo in Solano County. As we know, he was 6 years old. He was just shy of his 7th birthday. I believe his birthday was March 3rd of 1980, and he went missing on February 21st of 1987. Obviously, the community went searching for him. I know, and everything that I've read, there was at least 30,000 flyers that were put up all around Vallejo, all around our community, and there was, you know, a search by many, many people in our community. as you can imagine, with a 6-year-old that's gone missing. So, and we also know that about 4 days later, unfortunately, Jeremy Stoner's body was found at Sherman Island. Obviously, every parent's worst nightmare, and this community's worst nightmare. And I think that this death, this murder of Jeremy Stoner, it rocked this whole community. I wasn't here at that time, but just from everything I've read and all the people I've talked to that were around and part of this case, it really rocked the foundation of Solano County. So during that investigation, after his body was found, and I know that Vallejo Police Department was interviewing several people, anybody that may know anything about Jeremy Stoner's death. And one of those people that was interviewed on, it was March 3rd of 1987, was Fred Kane. And we know later that day, a person walked into the Vallejo Police Department, Sean Melton, and basically had his own investigation. He was either an investigator, a private investigator, or a wannabe investigator, but he really wanted to help solve this case, and he walked into the Vallejo Police Department with his own investigation into Jeremy Stoner's death. And after lengthy interrogation, hours and hours and hours, he was eventually became the suspect in Jeremy Stoner's death and was arrested and was charged back in 1987. What we do know is that because of all the pretrial publicity that occurred in Solano County, because obviously this is, I think, one of the most highly publicized cases that's ever occurred in Solano County, when you have a violent death of a young 6-year-old, it rocked the schools, the parents, the adults, the children, everything. And so we know that Sean Melton was charged and he was tried elsewhere. The case got moved to Sacramento because of the pretrial publicity here in Solano County. We know that that first trial, the jury was unable to unanimously reach a verdict of guilty, and it was tried a second time by the Solano County DA's office. And even in that second trial, the jury was unable to unanimously reach a verdict of guilty. So I know that Peter Four, who's now retired, a judge that I've appeared in front of numerous times, I have the utmost respect for. I know he defended Mr. Melton back then. He was a deputy public defender. He made a motion to dismiss the case so that it was not tried a third time. And I know Judge Dwight Ely, who's also retired now, dismissed the case. And Mr. Melton was released from custody. So I want to fast forward about 35 years to October of 2022. And our cold case investigators, Kevin Quello and Steve Housey, began to take another look at this case. And because somebody had come up to them and said, you just may want to take another look at this case. Not everyone always believed it was Sean Melton who was responsible for Jeremy's death, and that nobody had been convicted. And so nobody had been held responsible. And, you know, we're all about holding offenders accountable and getting justice for crime victims. So at the head of Kevin Quello, he kind of led the investigation in this case, and not knowing much about it at the time that they started looking at it in October of 2022, he obtained evidence that had been collected from the autopsy of Jeremy Stoner, and he sent it off to a forensic laboratory to have DNA testing done. And when he got it back, he got results that there was a profile from the evidence that he had submitted that had been taken at the autopsy. And so once they were able to develop this profile, they were able to then see if that DNA that they were able to obtain from the evidence collected at the autopsy, if that matched that of Sean Melton. And at that point, late last year, we learned that Sean Melton was not a contributor to that DNA, and therefore has been exonerated in the death of Jeremy Stoner. So obviously it led, because there was an evidence profile, it led to that there's another suspect in the case, and at that time it was unknown to both of these investigators. And so after, I think you've read through at least 1,000 pages of police reports, all kinds of reports to see, well, who could this DNA belong to? Because a lot of people say, well, did you get a CODIS hit, right? And it wasn't a case in which you could put into CODIS. And so after lengthy investigation by both of these two investigators, tirelessly working on this case to try to obtain justice for the Stoner family, it led to a suspect by the name of Fred Kane, who was arrested on September 18th, last Monday, in Oregon, at or around near his house. He has since waived extradition, and we are working to get him transported here to Solano County. I do want to thank both the Jackson County Sheriff's Office and the Solano County Sheriff's Office for working with us to get him transported, Mr. Kane transported here to Solano County, and we expect him to be in Solano County within the next couple days. So we will obviously give you updates with respect to Mr. Kane when he comes into court and he is arraigned. We have charged Mr. Kane. We have copies of the complaint. I know that there was a lot of asking questions for the copy of the complaint. We have charged him with murder, with special circumstances, with respect to kidnapping, sodomy, and a lewd act on a child. We have also charged him with suffering a prior serious felony for which he was convicted in 1979 prior to committing this offense, and those were for sodomy and rape. I just want to say, I kind of want to conclude with that I feel that DNA is such a powerful tool in these cases, and it's such an important tool because it can not only solve crimes, like we believe it's solving this one, but can also exonerate somebody who is innocent. And so I think it is unfortunate. You know, I've reached out to Judge Peter Four, who was the Deputy Public Defender at the time that he represented Mr. Melton. I've reached out to him. You know, it's unfortunate that Mr. Melton was tried for a case, a crime that he did not commit, and that he died without being able to be here to know that he's exonerated. But I think it's really important that we are exonerating him here today, and the importance of DNA in exonerating him and actually leading to the suspect that is responsible, that our office believes is responsible for the brutal murder of Jeremy Stoner. And we couldn't have done it without the very hard work that they dedicated since October, and once they started looking into this case, and that is Kevin Coelho and Steve Housey.
Well, congrats on the arrest. 1987, he commits murder, and you're charging him for a 79 crime.
87.
87. Has there been a crime he's connected to in between that time and now?
So I don't want to do anything that is going to jeopardize our criminal case against Mr. Kane. I think that those facts will flesh out in court.
And I know you had Kane before, previously when this first came out, three decades ago. They interviewed him. What happened? Why was he released back then?
He wasn't released. He was somebody that was interviewed by the police. They were interviewing all kinds of people in the investigation. I can't answer that. I wasn't part of this back in 36 years ago. So we're now looking at it. Obviously, we're looking at the statement that he made to the police officers back then. But he was interviewed on March 3rd of 1987, and we know later that day is when Mr. Melton walked into the police department, and whatever transpired during that interrogation, which went on for some time, led them to believe that he was the primary suspect in the case.
No connection to Stoner? They weren't family friends? Kane didn't know the child?
I without going into details, I can say that he did know the child.
He did know the child. And where was he living at the time? Martinez, I understand, right?
Mr. Kane?
Yes.
Again, I don't want to really get into the details of Mr. Kane because we are trying him, so I don't want to get into the fact. I can say that he was not living in Vallejo.
Do you know if he's being looked at? There was another young boy who was killed a month before in Martinez. Do you know if he's going to be looked at in that case, or?
I can tell you that I know that the police department in Martinez, right? Is it Martinez, that are obviously interested in trying to solve that case as well.
Has your office spoken with Jeremy's family? How have they reacted to the news?
And I can.
They're very faithful.
Can you
It's an
do you-
emotional
step
wreck.
up to the
Sure.
microphone?
She said your name too, but do you mind stating it and spelling it, please?
Kevin Coelho, Coelho. We've spoken with the Stoners. They're very appreciative. Obviously, it's a big shock. They had information that Milton was a suspect, and they believed he was. And it's a shocking, emotional event for the family.
How is it, though, for you to be able to bring a little closure here?
It's an unfortunate situation from start to finish, and it's nice that hard work pays off, and hopefully bring a little closure to the family. Can't bring Jeremy back. It's absolutely horrible what the family's gone through for the last 37 years, but hopefully this will bring a slight bit of comfort.
This detective?
Investigate.
Investigate.
I was going
And-
to ask, how exhausted has this been with all the different people through the last 30, 40 plus years? It must have been just a enlarging, almost exhaustive process.
It's a very lengthy investigation, and there's quite a few documents. It's almost overwhelming how much information there is related to this case.
Can you
How
give
long
us a
were you
little
at the
more-
Vallejo Police Department? You were at the Vallejo Police Department before this?
Yes, I was there 26 years.
26 years. Is this a case that had been talked about through the years? I mean,
Absolutely.
you worked
Sure.
that community.
I came to Vallejo a year after this case. I was familiar with it when I was with Contra Costa Sheriff's Department. It's a very well-known case. It's discussed often over the years.
For you personally, to be able to help solve it, I mean,
It's very, I took a very personal interest in this case. I was familiar with the Stoner family. It's a case that affected the community that I worked in most of my adult life, and it was very rewarding, for sure.
Can you tell us a little bit more about making that actual DNA match and how you obviously had the DNA from the boy and this other DNA that showed up, and did you have to collect DNA now or recently from the suspect, or was that something already in the system? Or
Oh.
I'll defer that to Ms. Abrams. I don't.
Right,
know what
we don't really want to get into the facts of the case in terms of they didn't have the technology then that they have now. And so a lot of people say, Mr. Milton was tried, why was he tried? And unfortunately, we didn't have the type of DNA testing that we have now back then. So many cases were circumstantial, not a lot of physical evidence back, years and years and years ago. And that's homicides, sexual assault cases, and so thank goodness for all the rapid technology with DNA, because it can solve so many cases. And so I don't want to get into all the DNA because I just don't want to jeopardize this case that's going to be pending in front of the court.
And the 1979 felony that involved sodomy and rape, what location was that in, and was there a child involved, I guess, in that?
I can just say what's in the public document, which is in our complaint, which is in Contra Costa County. It was Contra Costa County.
And just to be clear, this is the first cold case that's been solved since you reinstated the, correct?
No, we've solved several.
Can anyone tell me what Kane's disposition was, what it was like when he was arrested? Did you get some information? Were you there near Medford when he was arrested?
We were there.
And when he was taken into custody, what was his demeanor?
He was very compliant.
Was he compliant?
can you tell us what he was doing? Was he just retired, living? I mean, was he working? What did he do in Oregon?
He seemed to be retired. I can't get into a lot of detail because of the pending.
We could say that he's 69 years old and he was residing in Oregon. Any other questions? I just want to say one last thing, because when I was reading a lot of articles and talking to Judge Four, something that just stayed with me with respect to what Sean Milton had stated after the second hung jury, and he specifically said that if he had done this, he would not have wasted the court's time, he wouldn't have wasted the victim's family's time, he wouldn't have wasted everybody's time, he would have admitted it. And he said, the only reason I keep fighting this case is because I'm innocent and I want the real person to come forward or be found. And so I think it's, even though it's 36 years later, I give all the credit to these investigators that took the time. We have so many homicides. I think we have 70 pending homicides in our office right now, and there's a lot of unsolved cases. But for them to take the time to go back to a case that's 36 years old and try to seek the truth, although Mr. Melton's not here, is that the DNA, the science did lead to the right person, and we hope that he's held responsible.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thank you.
When did Mr. Milton die? How long, when did he die?
He died in 2000. He was 38 years old.
Were you able to reach out to any of his family?
We have reached out to his family,
What was
Investigator
their
Polo.
statement, or what they said?
Very emotional, but grateful.
Do you have any children? Who was he survived by?
His brothers, and I just learned that his mother is still alive. I'd read an article, but I was, our information was that she had passed.
How was, during this time, what method did you believe Kane used?
That's something that we have
Right.
to hold on to.
Right. That's just something that we just can't disclose at this time. It'll be, I mean, you'll learn it in court.
So he'll be, brought here, again, when do you expect him to be?
Well, we're expecting him to be brought here tomorrow the next day, and then he should be arraigned shortly thereafter, but pending any, circumstances that are unknown to us, but that's what we expect. We've already charged him, so then he would be set for an arraignment within a day or two of when he arrives here.
And you'll notify us or
Yes.
keep us in the loop
So-
in advance of the arraignment so that we could
Yes.
possibly be here? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
As long as you're on our contact list. Monica Martinez, where are you? She's here.
We'll make
She's
sure.
back here, and she will make sure that she sends that you're on her contact list, and she can get all that information to you. She has a copy of the complaint if anyone needs it. She has a copy of the booking photo if anyone needs it.
So before he's arraigned, she'll let us know.
Yes, as long as you're on our list.
I'm on your list.
Okay.
We want to be on the list.
People always say, you forgot me. I'm like, you got to tell us. So, anyway, thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
And then, my term on. Yeah, but it's, Monica Coleman.
You need a higher mic stand. I know. It's tall. I was waiting for you guys to say something.